All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this session. We're discussing a super interesting topic today. We're going to talk about how do you activate precision marketing at scale. And it's probably sufficient to say that today it's probably one of the biggest topics that the marketers are dealing with. So to say, it's like the holy grail of what we are trying to achieve as the marketing community. I have two of my industry colleagues with me today to talk about this. We have Anurag. Anurag is the Senior Director and Head of Digital Operations at Bayer. And we have Lauren. Lauren is Senior Director, Global Head of Commercial Digital Innovation in Ipsen. Welcome, both of you. Lovely to have you guys here to talk about this very, very interesting topic. Before I start throwing questions at you, let me just quickly set the context. Right? While this whole COVID wave went away, I think there have been some very exciting changes that we have seen as marketers in the industry, right? Content was the king, still is the king, still very, very important. But now we are all thinking about how do we take this message, the right message, to the right audience. We're thinking about segmentation, we're thinking about sub-segmentation, we're thinking about hyper-segmentation, right? I think the day will come when this N will be equal to 1, which means that every HCP, every customer that we target, we're going to have a strategy for that customer on how do we engage that? How do we engage that customer on what kind of channels, what kind of content, what kind of messaging? I think that day is not far. But the biggest problem that we are yet to solve for is how do you implement it at scale? How do you do it across brands? How do you do it not just for one geography or mature geography, but multiple geographies? How do you make sure that the regulations allow for it? And all of these are the threads that I would love to pick your brain on as we move forward. So let me start with you, Anurag. Let me give you a quick question on this. How should organizations in itself tackle this, right? Are the current approaches good? What are you seeing in the industry? How do you think this is going to work?
Thanks, Marut, and thanks for kind of putting me up on this panel. And I have a distinguished set of panelists with Lauren here, so I'm super excited to have this conversation and super delighted to be part of this. So if we look at the broader stroke of what's been going on, right? You talked about COVID and you talked about some of the accelerations that have happened. There's been a lot of organic growth. The organic growth has happened because of functional, each function trying to say, all right, what can I do better? What can I do differently? But if you take a step back and say, all right, what exactly is riddling it, right? You talked about one of those things, which in a content supply chain, the whole content transformation journey is suboptimal. There are opportunities at scale that, unless you can build the whole behemoth algorithm and all the things, get everybody orchestrated ready. But the point is, if you have the same content, it's not going to work. The other thing that challenges pharma is really in data, right? Data about behaviors, preferences, attitudes, about our HCPs, as well as our consumers. What do they like? What do they want? What are their patterns? We don't have that for regulatory reasons. And even when I'm collecting that data collection is very high level, and there's very strict guardrails. So putting these two things together, now I'm looking at, all right, I have a sporadic aspect of one of things that are happening organically with each function, and I have these greater constraints. So yes, progress is there. But now if you look at it, this isn't like a one function challenge, right? This is, we talk about scale, we talk about precision marketing. It's a lot of functions. It's data, it's analytics, it's all the channels / platforms, it's the content, it's customer experience, it's the targeting and segmentation, all of those together. So I feel organizations need to look at this as one holistic incubator, right? You look at the whole aspect of what do I need to do to bring these functions together and create a holistic approach, right? It's not sporadic and organic and symbiotic, improvements, but more thought through, focused, where we are building on one common aspect as opposed to kind of doing some things in a silo and trying to make progress.
Yeah. No, thanks. Anurag, you touched on a lot of points here. And, in my head, if I think about summarizing this session, I think you already did that for me. But there's a couple of points that I would pick on, which I thought were very interesting. Especially it's not a one function's job, right? And more organizations are actually realizing that, right? It was a tech problem to begin. We didn't have to, right? We solved that to some extent. A lot of organizations have solved that. And then you're talking about how does all of these different functions come together to enable the organization to achieve that goal, if you will.
Mhm.
Any comments on that, Lauren, before we go to the next step, if you will? Oh, you're on mute, Lauren.
It's a Zoom meeting, so of course we have to one of those moments.
Okay.
Thank you, Maru, for the question and for the opportunity to be here. Likewise, Anurag, really honored to be here with you. I think you brought up a great point, which is that I think a lot of the excitement of the technological advances made people zoom first to what's the infrastructure, what's the platform, what's the tool we can get, when ultimately, right, for any industry and for us in pharma, I think it needs to start with what's the business need, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, and therefore what's the mindset, skill set, tool set that we need to have to get to that business solution and not the other way around.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you start with the right context, I think slowly, while it may take some time, things do fall in place. Right? So another point that Anurag alluded towards was technology, right? A little bit.
Mhm.
We hear a lot of buzzwords, right? I mean, AI, CDPs, ML. I'm just curious, Lauren, what's your take on it? Are these buzzwords? How are these good things going to enable precision marketing and that to its scale?
Yeah, definitely. I'm personally very excited about this. I will also say candidly and humbly, at Ipsen, we are still at the beginning of the journey of reaching precision marketing, like precision medicine, right? That is the future, as you beautifully articulated. But we are still at the beginning of building blocks to set up a strong foundation that enable that. So a lot of the things I think are super exciting. We're not using all of them today. But I would love to pick your brain, like also hear back, Anurag, how you guys might be utilizing that. But jumping in, right, like the emerging technologies, I think AI in the form of classic AI has been used for quite a few years now, right? And we've seen successful results of applying that in predictive analytics. How can we target physicians based on the underlying patient population they might have that fit characteristics that we know from past data, can be predictive of certain behavior, maybe good candidates for our treatment, good candidates for switching to a different line of therapy, for example. And that's been successfully applied and utilized today, I think, quite widely. Another area, patient risk stratification, especially when you look at Europe, single payer countries where the cost effectiveness analysis is very critical for drug therapy, being able to stratify patients based on their risk and therefore position the most innovative treatment for the patients who stand to benefit from it the most is quite strategic. And again, something that I've experienced and seen other companies try to tackle. And just jumping to the other technologies, I think NLP, right, natural language processing, has been very interesting for us to better understand sentiment of our customers. I think more and more pharma companies are learning from our retail consumer industry peers, how they're using tools like social listening. But with NLP, you can move that to the next level, right? Not just how many times your product's mentioned or basic sentiments like positivity or negativity. You can really try to use NLP to understand more who they are, what's their context, why they're feeling the sentiment. All of that, I do want to add a disclaimer, like Anurag said, need to have guardrails. And in our industry, particularly, there are a lot of regulations. So it depends on the data that you can compliantly get. Generative AI, right? Everyone has been talking about it since ChatGPT dawned on the scene in December, and a lot of excitement, I think, using Gen AI to use large language models that can, for example, train a data set of medical data, medical information, that one day we can let our customer query information in their own language instead of feeding them in, prepared formats that we think they want. Another use, you can think about user interviews, customer interviews, right? Today we do a lot of that in our market research. With Gen AI, you can possibly do that at a much larger scale with similar resources. We also can think about marketing creativity. Right? Everyone have probably played at this point with Midjourney and DALL-E for image generation, instant mock-ups you can have. But there are also tools now for video, like whole film creation in a short amount of time, which again, with the right guardrails, all the IP security, privacy concerns in mind, can be quite revolutionary in how we create marketing material. You can even think about, for some industries, some companies outside of pharma I've seen using digital opinion leaders or influencers. Like there was a video you might have seen. You might not be able to get Jennifer Lopez in person to be your brand ambassador, but you can have an AI generated version, right? And if Jennifer agrees, and there are even companies using pure digital avatars in the metaverse. And I'll be on record to say I have a lot of concerns about the metaverse, but the fact that that exists in parts of the world is an option that we should be mindful of. So those are some examples on Gen AI. And I think you mentioned also, Marut, on CDP, customer data platform. And so all of the AI emerging technology solutions we've mentioned ultimately require data and generate data, right? So having good quality data set to begin with and being able to collect data of our customer interactions and gather them in one place that allow for analytics that generate insight for further customization is critical, but it's not easy to do, and certainly something we are trying to navigate within Ipsen. So very curious how our Anurag, you guys might have navigated that.
Yeah, so great points, Lauren. I think from a point of view of AI, right? So for the last few years, right, the buzzword before generative AI or ChatGPT was next best action, right? So we basically used, and I know everybody's talked about a data platform and next best action, and in different capacities, different organizations have done those things. And there's, again, to my initial comments of a couple of minutes ago, there's progress. Now, there's two things that to remember about like AI, and I think that's going to be even true for generative AI as a next, like as we evolve that from structured to unstructured, right? So, one is the quantity and the quality of data that goes in. I think that's super important because that really defines the kind of output you're going to get. And two is the specificity of the questions you're asking. Sometimes, like, you may have the best data, but if you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answer. So I think generative AI holds a lot of promise, in the spaces of not just like, crunching the data and providing some assistance to information, but also in more non-technical, like content, in the content space and content in editing or in creating more messaging strategies, right? So I think that is something that the organizations will have to, leverage appropriately with the right kind of controls and checks in place.
Makes sense. And Lauren, by the way, that's a very power-packed answer. There are a bunch of threads that we'll probably pick up later on in this conversation. But one thing I think a lot of people are to some extent envious of what Ipsen is doing, right? I mean, you have the luxury to some extent of putting these things in place from scratch, right? So you have to deal with less incumbency, if you will, right? Not, I won't say that you don't have to deal with it, but a little bit less. So maybe one thread that, and Anurag, maybe you can answer this question. When you think about organizations which are rooted and deep-rooted and been doing this for a very, very long time, you have to balance what exists versus what you need to create and where do you need to move. Where is the balance? How do you balance?
Yeah, I think, the balance, if you're talking about, let's say, traditional channels and new channels, and how do you create that synergy, right? And, it's not about the shiny new object. It's not about chasing a channel just because it's available. It's really always be focused on the customer experience, right? And meeting the customers where they are for the disease and the condition we're treating, right? There's no one size fits all that because it says, here are the channels, go and deploy them for all the brands and all the conditions you have. So very important to toggle between the things. But, I'm strongly believe in, doing and defining your audience. Who are you chasing? Who are the people who are going to be most impacted or the most benefited from the disease and condition messaging that you're talking about? And then what does the journey look like? Whether it's a customer journey, consumer journey, what does that look like? How do you intervene and influence some of those things? And at the moment of intervention and influencing, you define those channels. Now, it's quite possible that considering the fact that digital is real time, you can measure it, you have a lot more data behind it, a lot of the things will become digital. And like always, right, organizations will basically look at the ROI and say, right, if I spend $1 here, what am I getting out on the other side? Is this measurable? Is this impactable? So digital, may have a good chunk because of the fact it's a lot of our day-to-day stuff is digital. I mean, if you look at the direct mail we get today versus the emails and all the other communications we get, it's a clear indicator. But that doesn't mean that the print or the additional traditional channels are off the window. For the right audience and the right awareness, branding, details is when we bring those into play. So it should be more of a holistic end-to-end approach that's driven by who am I talking to and what do they want and where they are.
Yeah. Well, listen, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. I think I'll just do a quick follow-up on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I want to get from you is that, see, it's easy to switch something on to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's easy to try something new. It's incredibly hard to switch something off, right? Tomorrow,
Yeah.
and then by the way, listen, everybody deals with the ROI. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
has to justify. Lauren has to do it. I have to do it. You have to do it. Audience, 100 of us, everybody has to do it. Right? But what is the justification of stopping something? Is that harder to do in a more mature organization versus a newer organization?
From a stopping perspective, Marut, I'll go back to the whole ROI thing, right? Your budget is limited,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you have $100 to spend and you're going to basically say, what are the channels? And if you've done your diligence, what are the channels that will mostly impact the customer journey in the most profound way and give us the better shot at reaching them and engaging with them? That's when it is. And so organically, some of the channels that have a higher spend but low impact or low return will slowly start to fade off. So it's always going to be based on, where am I reaching and what can I expect out of the game once it's over, to basically build on the engagement, right? So build on the experience, build on the discussion that I'm having in those channels.
Yeah.
If I can jump in, Maruda, I agree with you. I think for an organization that's been established and have a lot of precedents, it's a different dynamic. I think certainly we have the privilege for a younger organization to be able to set the culture and the mindset, right? So I think one aspect is if we set from the beginning that the mindset of test and learn, that we're going to be agile, we're going to do proof of concepts, pilots, etc., and for the purpose of learning, and with the business goal with clear KPIs. And when we stop something, it's not seen as a failure of the team, a failure of an individual, then it gives people a lot more safety to try things and then to make the decision, which sometimes is the best decision to stop something. So I think that's one on the mindset piece. And then practically, I agree with Anurag, like using data, making data-driven decisions is important. But I think, again, at the beginning of an initiative, if it's a new initiative, to set up clear KPIs and set up one that we're going to analyze the results also facilitates the decision that if it's not meeting the targets in a way that's hard to change because fundamental characteristics, that's time to stop.
Yeah. And to some extent, that'll also help align the overall leadership chain, right? I mean, why are you doing this? What is the success factor? What are the parameters, KPIs that you're measuring? When will you not just scale it, hopefully, but if needed, stop it, right? So to your point, absolutely. And, I think you guys are both doing a phenomenal job in your organizations doing that. So I'm hoping that people who are listening to it, watching this, can learn a little bit more from the examples that you're giving here. But Lauren, I'll go back to one of your earlier comments on how is this relevant for HCPs? How is it relevant for patients, right? So let's think about that context a little bit and help me understand what role does this real world data, advanced analytics, how do you use that to tailor messaging to these groups of customers, influencers, if you will?
Yeah, I think to some extent, Anurag already mentioned, I think understanding what our customers want, whether that's physicians or in markets that allow that, patients is key. So I think about it as two category of reward data. One is just generally our target physicians, and we have to know who are our target customers, physicians or patients, how they consume data today, and which types of data in which channels. So for example, does a physician of the specialty we are interested in go to Doximity for a job posting versus they go to LinkedIn for an article versus they go to UpToDate to check some information about a disease or versus going to bench practice? Like, what are the channels they use for what purpose, generally speaking? So we can create a hypothesis and test our marketing strategy. And then the second category is how they actually interact with our digital assets, right? Our different Google ads, our banner ads, our websites, the variety of channels that we deploy, how are they actually interacting there? What's the engagement? And then also using surveys, et cetera, to get some real qualitative feedback. And that will help us adjust and fine tune the initial hypothesis and make it more and more tailored at the individual level.
Yeah, no. So essentially what you're saying is that one is obviously the channel effectiveness, right? You're trying to measure how effective a particular channel is for a particular group of target audience, if you will. And then it's also the content effectiveness to some extent, right? I mean, people respond very differently to different kinds of content like videos or a mailer or a podcast, right? And fortunately, over the last few years, pharma marketers have tried everything. So there is so much data available right now to evaluate these channels and content that all of that goes as a input to your strategy. So essentially, you don't really have to do everything on your own. Like, you don't have to make the same mistakes that your predecessors or your colleagues in the industry have made, and you learn from those data-driven approaches to define your strategy. I love that answer. Maybe, Anuraga, I'll just do a follow-up on the same question and with you. When you think about the data-driven approaches that you guys are using in your environment, when you think about technologies that you guys are using or have found most effective, talk to me a little bit about what that has been and what that has meant for personalizing data, personalizing messaging or channels for your target audience.
Yeah, that's really a great question, Marut. And I think, the technologies, there's a plethora of those as they've come up, but, like we talked about next best action and all the solutions that kind of support next best action. But let's take 3 steps back, right? So historically, what we used to do is we used to have like a static list, and we basically, like, within a function, have a list of people saying, hey, here's the people, here's the messages, send this to them. Or the sales reps would have, here's their targets, like, here's your detail aid, and, talk to them. So, and since then we've evolved, and there's some more data coming in. Like I mentioned, this next best action, other things have come in. I think the biggest thing that I've seen happen, or, given the biggest fruits, is kind of connecting functions, right? So for example, marketing and sales. If I can connect marketing and sales and basically look at the journey of what's going on, and how do I create a more synchronous journey as opposed to an ad hoc, sales rep goes, sees Dr. John Smith, and there's a marketing communication to Dr. John Smith, and they're totally disparate. Or I can even do marketing and medical. And again, there's, of course, firewalls, guardrails, legal, regulatory, all those things have to be put in place, right? So I'm not intending to say that that's like a free for all market, but it's just like looking at information that is allowable to be shared across a firewall. How do you take that and how do you connect and create a synchronous experience for the customer? It's about the customer, not about the brand, right? So how do you make that connections? And that's where I think I've seen a couple of times where that has been fairly successful, where you connect the 2 different functions, look at the data, right? Bring the data together, whether it's internal, external, bring the data together and start to look at trends and patterns, and then identify a hypothesis that you can test in the market, saying, hey, whenever I've seen this, and this happen, this happens. And then test drive it with the right content, implement it, and see if the metrics line up with your hypothesis. If they do, great, you can build and kind of go into other branches and other use cases. If they don't, then you have to go back and look at the drawing board and saying, there's something else that's playing that I didn't catch in the definition of the use case. So it's more about identifying the right, functions, and then the potential high impact use cases. And once you have those, then I think it becomes more of a detailed exercise of how do you take this information that we have and bring it to market with the right intent.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. So maybe let me just pick one question and of what you said and throw it to Lauren.
Mhm.
This collaboration between medical and marketing or commercial, if you will, for lack of a better. I've heard about this being a topic of very interesting discussion in multiple sessions before ours, right? In this summit and in other forums. How do you guys at Ipsen look at this collaboration between commercial and medical?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And I would say the commercial and medical being a key connection, but also value and access and like under access sales, there are a lot of other functions that need to be connecting together will also generate content and data. But to your question about commercial and medical, right? Like a lot of commercial content use medical information, and there are data that can be disseminated through sales reps. So I think designing the data in a way with medical, that's typically already done today. But there are also types of medical information that cannot be disseminated through just marketing and sales, the commercial functions. And there, I think, candidly, at Ipsen, we have not done a great job historically in making sure those content are also designed with a quality and orchestration that create a seamless and pleasant experience for our customers. But that's where we have already started looking into. And we have some great sponsors and champions in our medical function who see that future. I want to make it today, right? So I give you an example, creating modular marketing content so we can more easily and more cost effectively generate more content in different formats that can tailor to different customers' needs. That we've been doing for marketing, but similar approach makes sense for medical. And we have medical leaders who are coming to our team and proactively asking, how can we do that more? So all the great content we have does get to physicians in a way that benefit them. So I think that's really exciting for us, where that thinking, the methodology in how to create that good marketing commercial content is also going into medical. And then I think that ultimately, I mentioned there are different other functions that also generate content, right? The cost effectiveness and analysis, etc. I think ultimately it needs to be an integrated and orchestrated platform for our physicians where they can find all the information they need. They don't care which function it is in the pharma company, right? But these are different information that they or their institution would need that all need to be integrated in a compliant way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And think of it from a consumer of this information or data standpoint, right? I mean, one within the same organization, they don't expect a different experience just because it is coming from medical or just because it is coming from commercial, right? And to that extent, if I extrapolate this a little bit, right? Consumer are used to a very different level of experience now. I mean, when I'm looking at some information, I'm looking at an Amazon level of experience or an X level of experience, or so many of these other industries who have done a really fantastic job of setting the expectations, right? So my expectation today doesn't change just because I'm interacting with a different industry. That's the nature of the beast, right? And more we realize that, or more and more we learn from other industries and bring those best practices within not just our function, but our industry. I think the better it'll be for us as we kind of move forward and figure this the beast out, if you will, right? So Anurag, any comments on that?
I wanted to kind of just add to Marut what you're talking about, right? So I think, again, as I mentioned, it's about the customer and the consumer we're talking about, not about us, right? Ideally, you would want one command center that's basically articulating the messaging that's going in and making sure that the messaging is building on or is appropriate for the customer, as opposed to I'll throw dots on the wall, whichever one sticks is the one that's going to work, right? So organizations have a great opportunity to look at this, as I mentioned, the sales, marketing, access, medical, there's multiple touch points through different channels happening to the same customer. Are they all in harmony? Are they all synchronized? Are they all telling the same thing? Is there an oversaturation? Are we bombarding the same person with different messages so that they basically just get, fed up and unsubscribe? How is that? And what's the value, right? I mean, I think, one of the key things is what's the value of the customer if he unsubscribes, right? What did you lose? So I think having that really end-to-end visual is very critical as opposed to the silos that I think we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of this old story that we all probably heard as kids, right? That there are kids who have their eyes closed and they're touching different parts of the elephant and they're trying to figure out what that animal is. Now, listen, we are in a world where not only can we see the elephant, we have VR glasses, right? I mean, we have so much data. We have so much data around us. It's just a question of putting all that data together, and we can reconstruct, dissect the elephant in any which way we want to get the insight that we really need to to get into creating a strategy that really works for all of us, right? I mean, so listen, I agree with you. So on that note, and this is a question probably for both of you, let me ask you guys, 5 years, 10 years down the line, technology is changing, we're getting new technology every day, right? Where do you feel, what is the future of precision marketing? Like, what kind of scale are we talking about? Are we talking about this being the thing for all of us? Or do you think that this is a fad that'll fizzle out after a bit? Let's have Anurag, you respond to it, and then Lauren, maybe you also add to it.
Sure. Yeah, I think appropriate, right, is looking, what's the horizon we're looking at. And as I mentioned upfront, right, there's two pathways. One is the organic, growth that's going to happen. More technologies will result in more things, right? We just talked about generative AI and stuff. It'll help to streamline some of the business processes, make things faster, give us some more insights and more inputs that we didn't have in near real time or in quick time. Or there's the other opportunities for the organization to see this as like, this is one concerted effort that has to come together with multiple teams, with one team, one dream vision. And once you depending on what side of the what approach the companies follow, there'll be progress. And regardless of that, it's just going to get, over the last 10 years, we made significant headway from where we were 5-10 years ago to now. And I think the same will continue. I don't think this is a fad. I think this it's going to get more and more finessed, more and more fine-tuned, and the pencil is going to get sharper in terms of reaching, right? The ideal state of 1-to-1. There are, because of pharma, there are constraints, and those constraints will stay. How do we manage that is up to the industry and the organizations themselves. But the progress and the speed of the progress will depend on how the organizations look at the problem. Is it a content problem and I got to solve a content problem and I'm done? Or this is an analytics problem and I solve this and I'm done? Or this is an organizational wide cross-functional customer-centric problem that I got to hit with multiple angles.
No, absolutely. Lauren, your comments on this one.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely agree. I don't think precision marketing is a fad. I think the trend towards precision, towards personalization is here across all the human experiences. I think education will be more personalized. I think financial options will be more personalized. Medicine needs to be more personalized, and our marketing through the products will need to be personalized. So definitely here to stay. But in the near term, right? Like, let's say the next 5 to 10 years in your question, I think there is a mindset change that needs to happen in the pharma organization level, that this is the trend and this is where we need to become. And I like how Anurag, you mentioned, it starts with the customer. It doesn't start with the channels, the content that we prepare. It starts with the customer. I think that mindset needs to change. And then I think that we talk about skill set, the sales reps, the way, I don't think they're going anywhere, but the way they work will change, right? I like Anurag talked about orchestrating the different channels, the different solutions that we have. I think the sales rep in the future need to become a quarterback of all the different channels, right? They know, they're on the ground, they know the customers intimately. So how can they work with marketing, work with medical, value access, and the different channels to bring the right content in the right format at the time the customer needs? I think that role will require that, and that means different skill set that we need to see in the sales force. And from an internal organization, I think how we organize the pharma teams around marketing, around omni-channel teams, like my team also need to change. I think today we see a lot of models where, like ourselves, it's a center of excellence because these capabilities are still earlier, at least at Ipsen. So we need to build the foundations and we need a special task force, right? But in the future, I think brands, countries need to have this capability built in. They're equipped and empowered to do omni-channel customer experience, precision marketing, with local data, with local regulations. So that's where I think the organization needs to go. And then with all of that, I think we also need to strengthen our discipline, right? I mentioned KPIs being really important. And I think Anurag, you also mentioned the importance to look at the outcome. I think today, when we look at omni-channel, previously multi-channel initiatives, it's a lot about what people call vanity metrics. It's like, ooh, how many views, ooh, how many clicks, but ultimately, what's the outcome we're trying to get to, and what this views and clicks translate into, right? Like if the main goal is to improve customer experience, what is the satisfaction experience metric that actually we see a lift? If the goal is to reduce costs and optimize our marketing spend, right? Then let's actually calculate the ROI there. And if the goal is to ultimately lift the prescription, then we need to delineate the different marketing initiatives effect actually on sales with proper control groups. And I think that shift to measuring outcome instead of just the activities need to happen sooner.
Love it. Love it. And listen, I'm sure a lot of commercial leaders will agree with you and they'll be nodding that not just on the fact that we should look at what metric we are measuring and align our strategies to it, but also your analogy on quarterback, the sales rep being the quarterback. I mean, a lot of times marketers miss that whole idea that we are still very, very, very far away from removing the human from the chain, right? We still need good reps. We still need people who can diligently take that message at a personal level to the doctor. I think these technologies take a long time to mature. I think all of us agree that precision marketing is here to stay. So we need to invest time, effort, money, energies in making them more efficient. But let's not forget about the quarterback, if you will. And to what Anurag said, until the time where these technologies mature, let's keep sharpening the pencil. I love that that analogy again. So listen, I would love to keep chatting. Both of you guys have been phenomenal in terms of giving us the insight. I have a bunch of questions popping up, and I'll take one question that I feel is extremely relevant in practice point of view and not just theory point of view, right? We keep thinking about this evolution. We keep thinking about evolution in technology. So what do we need to do as professionals? What do our team needs to do? What do they need to learn, relearn, prioritize in terms of their learning so they're successful and their organization can be successful? Lauren, maybe you can go first. Anurag, same question to you too.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think it's also a great reminder because being in a company and right in pharma, there are all these quarterly business reviews or earnings. We work closely with marketing team, sales team who have those near-term goals. And we have our annual roadmap, the projects already set. So it's very easy to just be heads down and look at all the work we have at hand instead of really constantly carving out time, like you said, that discipline to make sure we are keeping a pulse on the new technological advances, new solutions available, and keep learning. So to me, it's definitely something I think we can do better. But a learning culture, I think, is really important to set. So a small example I give is for the digital team we have a roughly monthly team learning session where we invite either cross-functional colleagues to come talk about what do their function do, what's their experience. So candidly, we have a lot of teammates, diverse profiles on our team that don't have that marketing, sales, or value access, or medical, or clinical development experience, but we work on solutions for them. So hearing that internal customer's point of view. And then we also have a learning session that invites our own teammates, again, very diverse profile, the software developers, or the omni-channel specialists to share their own experience, past projects they worked on, interesting learnings. And this is also something that in our weekly team meetings we do to just create a habit of regularly reflecting over our week and drawing out the learnings and paying attention to industry news that we can share back to our team. So I think in a very small way, those habits are important to create.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, love that, Lauren. I think I can answer the question, Marut, in two parts, right? One is external, one is internal. So I mean, double down on what Lauren just mentioned. What's going on outside? What is our competition doing? What are the new capabilities, enablers that are available? Again, don't get swayed by the shiny new object syndrome, but look at it as saying, how can that help support solving a business problem? How can that support driving business impact? How can that support creating better digital experiences or customer experiences? And from an internal perspective, right, as we kind of do on our day-to-day, looking at it and saying, asking the questions, right? Why are we doing this? What's in it for the customer? We just sent something else to the customer 2 days ago. Does this make sense? Right? Being more on the ground, being more customer-centric, and asking the questions so that people around us who may not be looking at it that way start to say, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, why are we doing this? What's the value proposition? How is this information and that information connected? So having some constructive dialogue as opposed to putting roadblocks, but so that to make sure that at the end of the day, are the people we are trying to build trust with, engage with, are the ones who kind of benefit out of this. I mean, they may not benefit, they may not know what's going on behind the scenes, they will never, but the point is at least they will start to see some smoothness in the level of communications that are coming in. So I think it's that, and of course from a leadership perspective, driving the aspect of connecting the dots together, looking at data sets and looking at opportunities holistically as opposed to within silos.
Awesome.
And if I might just add at one point, I think coming to events like this is extremely valuable. So thanks again for the opportunity. And I learned a lot, Anurag, from just hearing you. And I think that the opportunities like this that bring industry peers together, where we can exchange some best practices, maybe check some blind spots, is super important. And I really do believe that rising tides lift all boats. And we as an industry are in it together, right? We all have the same goal of helping our physicians choose the best therapy for their patients and ultimately get to better patient outcome. So the more we can do this better in each organization, the better for our customers.
I couldn't have said it better, Lauren. Thank you.
I mean, listen, I can just say that to close. I couldn't have said it better either. So listen, you guys have done a phenomenal job of bringing valuable insights on all aspects. I mean, we started with technology. We spoke about the data and how data can be leveraged for achieving our goals. We spoke about, I think very importantly, both of you brought up points around how organization silos need to be broken, right? We spoke about how do you measure the ROI, right? How do you make sure that the decisions that we are taking are aligned with our end objective, if you will. And most importantly, which I love both of you guys, very rarely it happens that everybody's on the same page. Keep the customer at the focus of it, right? Understand what your end customer really, really wants, right? And if you can figure that out first, then everything else is a jigsaw puzzle that will come together in the end for us to achieve our results. I'm listening, talking to you guys, I really have got a few more ideas, which I think I'm going to take back to my CTO office and see if we can spend more money on it. But I'm sure the colleagues who have been listening, they love what you have said and a lot of insights for them as well. So thank you very much. Really appreciate the time that you spent, that both of you have spent with us. Lauren, to your point, Indegene is also organizing a experience zone where we're also talking about data analytics as one of the areas. So again, a lot more to discuss and learn. With that, I'll thank you guys again and close the session. Loved having you guys here and some very, very valuable insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marut. Much appreciated. And great to connect.